We're revisiting the Plex server PC again today because after the end of my two-parter, I wanted to make a few more changes. More importantly, I wanted to neaten it up on the inside. And what do I mean by that is, well, I didn't go into this very much during the two-parter. The mount for the 2.5-inch SSD and the 3.5-inch hard drive, I was using adapters I wasn't quite happy with. So they are in there and they're secure, but not very well. So since doing that, I decided to do a few things. Some of the changes I'm going to make will include reinstalling a DVD drive. I want to have a 5.25-inch DVD drive in here so I can rip my DVDs directly on the machine. That means I will need to pull out the 3.5-inch hard drive. It's only a 500 gigabyte. I want to go bigger than that. So what I ended up getting from Corsair was this mounting bracket, but this is a dual solid state drive mounting bracket. It can house two 2.5-inch drives. Now the SSD inside of this is already 2.5 inches, so that's one slot taken up. I'm going to use this 1 terabyte 2.5-inch hard drive. I'm going to put this with the SSD in this bracket, and that's going to go in the 3.5-inch slot, and then that frees up the 5.25 for me to put a DVD drive back in. The only downside is this power supply doesn't have all of the power hookups for that. So I got a splitter. Unfortunately, I was incorrect when I said that this was a Plex ATX. The dimensions are close, but they're not close enough. And I'll show you what I mean when we get this open, because I do have this Plex ATX power supply, 350 watt. We're going to compare the size of this to the one that's in here, and we'll see the difference between them. But for now, we're going to open up this computer. All right, there it is, exactly as we left it. I haven't actually used this since finishing the last video because I knew there were changes I wanted to make that would require me to either copy over vast amounts of data. I just didn't want to do that. So I saved most of my setup for after I got some of these changes done, which is why we're here today. There is a future addition I want to make that is not a big deal, and that is that this motherboard, this MSI H110i Pro, does have a PCI Express M.2 slot on the backside for an NVMe PCI Express SSD. I'm going to move the 2.5-inch SSD operating system and everything onto that so that I don't have to worry about splitting or putting two devices on the same SATA power connection from the power supply. So I'll have the operating system on the M.2 on the underside of this. I will more than likely put a 3.5-inch hard drive back in here, something 1 terabyte or larger, and then still have the 5.25, the optical disk drive in the 5.25 slot here. But let's pull this apart. All right, then here is our caddy holding our 3.5-inch hard disk drive. This is the 500 gigabyte drive, and then our SSD down here. Now, as you can tell, the hard drive in here, it's actually only secured by these two screws on this side. There are two tension points here, but unfortunately the bracket isn't staying on there, and I'm not very happy about that, so we're going to pull that out. And then the 2.5-inch drive and the 3.5-inch bay down here is, well, secured here and up here. It's on an angle. Not a fan of that, and the cables are expecting these connections to be right flush or really close to this edge, and the fact that they're already back in here and upside down made wire routing a little tricky. So we're going to pull these out. All right, and there is our Samsung Evo 250 gigabyte SSD that has our operating system on it. All right, so here it is. So we're going to put these aside. We're not even going to use this drive. There's nothing on it. I never loaded anything onto this hard drive So I'm not heartbroken about not using it for this project. I'm going to put that aside. So here's our new 1 terabyte, 2.5-inch drive. Here's our 256 gigabyte SSD, 2.5-inch. All right, let's break open this guy. Okay, so we'll more than likely just load up things like so. And there we go. Now we have the 1 terabyte hard drive and the 250 gigabyte SSD both secured inside of this mount. To make things a little easier for us in the future, I'm going to go ahead and plug these in right now. Okay, so we can get this installed. Now it's going to go in like this. This is attaching to the power supply, so we want our data and power connections to be over here. And with that slot the way it is, we're going to put this in upside down. And it would seem the problem I'm having is that this power connector is catching on this lip right here. So it's difficult to get the caddy all the way forward, but I think I might have done it. That's where I need to be. So what I'm going to do, we're going to take this out. We're going to make a small hardware modification. We're going to take this lip and I'm just going to bend that straight so that it's up and out of our way. All right, there we go. I've taken that section and just bent it up by 90 degrees. So now when we slide the drive caddy in, my holes line up and I can easily access the power and the data connections here. Fantastic. All right, let me throw some screws in to support and hold this thing in. That'll be in this pack. All right, I've secured the caddy in there. So now we have our two 2.5-inch drives. All right, now for the optical drive. Instead of putting the original back in here, I decided to go with a slightly newer rewritable drive. I'm going to get this one installed as well. Now the 2 tension points on the far side are actually working properly because this drive is a 5 1/4 and is meant to go here. There we go. So we have all 4 of our holes lined up here, and then these are locked in place. Before I secure those though, I want to do a quick test fit to make sure that that drive is accessible. I've encountered a problem. The piece of metal I bent up out of the way is now interfering a little bit with this side piece. So I'm going to fix that by just bending it another 90 degrees and having it point straight down. All right, I modified it yet again. So now it's pointing straight down. So let's go ahead and try to fit that in again. Okay, but now that it's in place, I'm going to put on the front cover here. The eject button, the mechanical eject button on the front, which is this guy right here. I want to make sure that that lines up properly with the button on the drive, and it looks like it does. So this drive fits, that's good. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to put some screws in this to secure it. All right, so I have 2 screws in here securing the optical drive in this bay. So now we can go ahead and get that reinstalled in here. All right, there we go. We have this caddy in place holding our DVD drive, as well as two 2.5-inch drives, an SSD and an hard disk drive. Cable management is not great, but we can fix that a little bit. All right, so before I close this up and power it on and test it, I was going to go over the power supply differences. So here is the Plex ATX power supply, 350 watts. This is a 220 watt power supply of what I thought was a Plex ATX. However, it is not. While I am very nearly flush over here, the power supply in the case is quite a bit thicker. It continues past this point, so it's definitely much thicker than this. It's longer, so if we line up that end, yeah, it's much longer. And looking at from the back, the standard power jack is, I guess, more to the right side of the power supply, while this is more to the left side. So yes, I don't believe a Plex ATX power supply will work in this case, and I don't know what this is, so I don't know how to get something non-generic and newer. So it's going to be living in there for the time being. So there we go. We have everything put back together and a little bit of cable management going on. There's only so much I can do with some of these power cables. We'll come back to that in the future, maybe. But we have the optical drive installed. And then underneath, down in there, we have two 2.5-inch drives. So I think it's time we put this back together and start ripping some movies onto my Plex server. There we go, Plex server back up and running. Here is one of many stacks of DVDs that I will be putting on this computer so that I can enjoy these from my various mobile devices and other computers around. And we'll probably come back to this 1 or 2 more times depending on what updates I find for it. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.